listing day. Welcome to First Mover, your first global look at today's action in the Bitcoin, blockchain, and digital asset space. I'm your host, Christine Lee, and joining me are my co-hosts, CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Capital Markets, Lewitinn, and Managing Director of International Content, Emily Parker. Good morning. What a day today is going to be. A lot of excitement out there. Lawrence, where are your glasses?
I was told not to wear them because it would just be redundant.
$64,740, new all-time high for Bitcoin around 2 a.m. New York time. Obviously, during the European and Asian trading hours, they've been pretty busy. The direct listing today on the Nasdaq from Coinbase, the big story of the day, $250 is the set price, 66.5 billion valuation based on that, but kind of a little less than what we heard in previous days. Lawrence?
Yeah, it wasn't the 100 billion we were that a lot of people were hoping for or expecting. But hey, listen, 66 billion, you should take it. At the end of the day, it's it's a big exciting time for crypto. I've been calling it the crypto's bat mitzvah. Yeah, it's about 12 years old and it's gotten into maturity, and it's grown up. It's a grown up, an adult.
Yeah. It's ready to be a man. And we just saw a live shot of the Nasdaq in Times Square there, showing that Coinbase logo. Hey, Emily, your thoughts on the significance of this day in crypto and for Coinbase?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much everybody in the crypto industry has been talking about nothing else. This is really a signal of legitimacy for crypto. It just kind of crypto is now, it's arrived, and it's here. It's hit the mainstream.
I'm wondering, a lot of the people in the media have been saying this is the biggest IPO in history, but it's not an IPO, as you astutely pointed out, Emily. So they're a direct listing. Maybe tell us the difference between a direct listing and an IPO.
Yeah, well, that has been a very big misconception, that there's basically the simplest way to describe it is that there's less involvement from investment bankers in a direct listing compared to an IPO. So that's probably the shortest version.
All right. Taking a look at the XPX Bitcoin price right now, Bitcoin is trading at $64,245. It is up about 2%. The ETX Ether price also up 23.75 ETH. Hit a record earlier a couple hours ago. Now it's up 6.7% over the past 24 hours, according to Trade Block data, the most reliable reference price for institutions since 2014, with billions in assets under management benchmarked against it. All right, and our first guest was an early investor in Coinbase. He heads a crypto empire that includes Grayscale, a digital asset manager that oversees about $50 billion worth of Bitcoin, Ether, and other assets. As a disclaimer, that empire also includes CoinDesk. He is a leading investor in the crypto space with 149 companies in his investment portfolio. Joining us now is Digital Currency Group CEO, Barry Silbert. Welcome, Barry.
Good morning. Hello, CoinDesk TV.
Good morning. Great to have you on the show. And this is a very rare interview, as you haven't given one. I think on your Twitter you said hasn't been a public appearance in 8 months. So thanks for joining us. I just want to
the bunker for you guys. Figured today's a good day.
Yeah, fresh out of the pandemic bunker for CoinDesk TV. Thank you very much, Barry. But today is an historic day, so it's a good day to choose to come out. Maybe you can outline the significance of this public listing, in your view, to the crypto industry and to you personally, because you saw Coinbase grow in its early days just from 2 guys out of a 2-bedroom apartment. Maybe you can outline what it was like, initially meeting them, seeing them through this journey, the highs and lows, and what it is today.
Wow. Okay. Well, is this a 4-hour show? 5 hours?
We got time for you, Barry.
What we're talking about is, this is we're going on 8 years now, 9 years. Look, it is an important day for our industry. Today, everything changes. And everything changes, I think, in ways that some we can predict in some way, and some we just can't predict. So here are the way that it's going to change in ways that I think are quite positive. So obviously, we're going to have a tremendous amount of new money that's going to flow into the industry and the asset class. And most of the early investors in Coinbase, regardless of the round they came in at, they're gonna, if liquidity is taken, that money is going to get recycled, plowed back into Bitcoin, into hopefully the next Coinbase. So what's happening today is a new channel of capital is going to get piped into this entire industry, which is quite positive. Two, there has not really yet been a company that is publicly traded that could serve as a comp or a comparable for companies in the private space. And so every single crypto company today is being revalued. And that means that a lot of people in the space are on paper going to be worth more today. It means that a lot of investors are going to be able to put up even better returns. And it also means that new investors that want to come into the industry are going to be able to deploy money in a way that's informed, because they now know what a company is going to be worth when it goes public. So all of that is, I think, going to spur new company creation. It's going to spur a lot of new money coming into the space, and the rising tide is absolutely going to lift all of the boats. So that's why today is important. I can talk about the history of my Coinbase experience too, if that's interesting.
Yeah. So along those lines, Barry, you were an early investor in it. So how much is DCG going to come away with? How many shares do you guys have, and do you cash out here? Is this your exit strategy, or are you waiting?
Wow, you're going right for it. I love it. Yeah, look, we're not a big shareholder, but we invested $100,000 in Coinbase. I think it was a note that converted into the Series A, and so $100,000 is I think we've got about 500,000 shares today. And then we eventually put another $1 million in, I think it was Series C. But what's interesting is when I made that investment, it would have been, I think it was like April 2013. I actually used Bitcoin to make that investment. So the $100,000, I did a little digging this morning. I used 667 Bitcoin to make that investment in Coinbase. And what's really interesting is up until, frankly, today, Bitcoin was a better investment than even Coinbase, which I think is just a tremendous thing, and people have been able to participate in fantastic upside by owning Bitcoin, and so I was doing the math, and I think that $100,000 of Bitcoin at the time today is worth 50 million. So those 500,000 shares, depending on where you think it trades today, it ended up being a better trade. Now those Bitcoin, I bought for, I probably spent $5,000 on that Bitcoin. So 5,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to, do the math, whatever you think Coinbase is worth. So anyway, look, it's a great win for early investors. It's a great win for the Coinbase employees. And of course, we will take some money off the table. But the way that we're set up, that money just gets replowed back into the ecosystem. We may buy Bitcoin. We may buy Bitcoin miners. We're going to try to find the next Coinbase. We're going to invest more money in Luno to scale globally. Maybe we'll help CoinDesk, double your editorial staff. That money just gets plowed right back.
I'm good with that. That's good. But what in terms of how much are you going to cash out? How much are you going to leave in ultimately?
It's a good question. A lot of it is just relative for us, relative to the other assets that we have, but also relative to other opportunities.
I saw you tweet 250 wasn't a good price to sell at.
No. I mean, and I think, as you guys have pointed out, that's just a starting reference price. Coinbase at 150 billion, I will certainly convert Coinbase shares into other investments in the space. Below that, don't know.
What's your outlook on
Good
Bitcoin
morning.
in terms of the near term and long term, and for the industry at large?
The prospects for Coinbase, that was a question?
The price of Bitcoin, your outlook, near term, long term, and then the crypto industry at large.
Yeah, well, I would say that we hit the inflection point last year, where up until March of last year, I would have said I still think that there is an equal chance of Bitcoin going to zero and Bitcoin going to $1 million. But after we saw that drawdown in price, that one day where I think it dropped 50%, and then not only did it recover quickly, but then hit all-time highs, I think that certainly has given me the confidence to say, Bitcoin ain't going away. And now it's real. I think the next stop is certainly the gold market cap. And look, beyond that, I think a lot of what's going to drive the upside potential for Bitcoin is, unfortunately, the debasement of the dollar, inflation, and the value of the U.S. dollar going away. So $1 million Bitcoin is actually not the same purchasing power as $1 million Bitcoin 10 years ago. And so we're certainly quite bullish on the upside of Bitcoin still.
Good morning, Barry. So everybody's so excited about this, and it's obviously a very bullish moment. But let's talk about risks for a moment, potential long-term risks to Coinbase. It seems like they could come from one of two directions, or possibly both. One is from the traditional financial sector. That's more banks or brokerages getting into the crypto market. And then on the kind of the other extreme, it's decentralized exchanges, DeFi, sort of more crypto native products posing a threat to Coinbase. Coinbase has a strong first mover advantage, but where do you see potential longer term threats to its competitiveness?
Well, Coinbase is uniquely positioned from a brand perspective, and now from a capital perspective, and soon with a public equity currency that they can then use to make acquisitions and really to build quite a conglomerate. So I would say just from a business model perspective, your Coinbase is majority revenue is comprised of transactional fees, and Brian has talked very publicly about their efforts to diversify into whether it's earn interest or credit cards, whatever the case may be. So I think ultimately Coinbase will have competition, has competition, and that competition will increase. But I also think that Coinbase is now going to be able to effectively compete with not just the other crypto companies, but the Wells Fargos and the JP Morgans of the world, and that's just a much bigger market. So I think for whatever competitive risks exist for Coinbase in the crypto space, I think they're going to run circles around the JP Morgans of the world.
And while we're on the topic of risks, I'm sure you remember just not very long ago, Coinbase had a series of pretty big controversies. Brian Armstrong put out a mission statement saying that they had an apolitical mission that led to around 60 employees leaving. And then afterwards, the New York Times had a series of reports, one which had several Black employees on the record saying that they faced racial discrimination at work. And then later, there was another report that found by the New York Times that found a pay gap for Black and female employees. I'm just wondering, for you as a shareholder, how concerned are you about this over the long term? And is this something that people should be worried about?
It is hard to build a business, to scale a business. It is hard to run a company that has over 1,000 employees. And so I think Brian and team are always going to attempt to be as thoughtful as possible and make the right decisions, and they'll make mistakes on occasion. But I don't think it's a risk at all to the Coinbase business.
So Barry, what are the benefits of not being a public company? So why go through all the scrutiny? Why go through being subjected to quarterly reports? Is there any reason why Coinbase shouldn't have gone public?
Well, I'll speak for DCG. After this interview, I get to go back into my bunker for the next 8 months, and we get to keep our heads down. We get to be focused. We get to do things out of the spotlight. And frankly, I think at least for me, I spent 8 years being an evangelist for Bitcoin and doing every press opportunity and speaking at every conference that I could. And I feel like a bunch of us kind of, passed the torch to, Michael Saylor or like a, No Gratz. And so the benefit of being a private company in the space right now is the ability to kind of move quickly, be agile, and not get distracted with, with having to, support, justify, talk up a public stock price. When the Bitcoin price eventually drops by 20% in one day, the public company CEOs are going to have to be out there, be vocal. But having said that, there's tremendous opportunity being a public company. And so, as I said before, Coinbase, and there's a growing list of crypto companies, which some have been announced, some haven't been announced, which will be public. So you're going to see, it's great for the employees, it's great for the investors from a liquidity perspective, but it also gives them just cheaper access to capital, and most importantly, gives them the acquisition currency. We're already starting to see a little bit of consolidation, but over the next couple of years, we're going to see massive consolidation in the space, and it would be hard for a private company to compete with a public company like Coinbase.
So, given that you've been in the crypto space for a long time, I'd like to hear your perspective just on kind of the ethos of crypto. So Coinbase, in theory, Bitcoin was invented to kind of cut out the middleman, right? And Coinbase, to a certain degree, is a middleman. It is an intermediary. It resembles a big financial institution in some ways. Do you think there is any way that Coinbase kind of undercuts the spirit of crypto, or is it just part of a natural evolution?
Well, I wouldn't want to speak for Coinbase, their mission, their ethos, but I would make a more general statement about the industry, in that I think most of us who have been in this since very early on, we are all very mission driven, in that we are all trying to create a better financial system here. We all see the potential to remove friction and remove barriers around the movements of value around the world. And so from that perspective, I think the way that, at least the way that I'm going about that, is through the kind of the creation of businesses and the investment in companies and the investment in tokens that help to accelerate kind of the move towards that new system. And along the way, there's going to be important companies that are going to provide centralized services. There's going to be a growing number of decentralized projects and protocols and businesses that also kind of get us there. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of us early folks we fundamentally believe that a better financial system should exist, and it's one that there's not a central party that's rent seeking and taking large transactional fees to send money around. So
Barry, you're talking about early adoption into Bitcoin, or being an early involver in it. Do you know what your average price? Did you ever sit down and calculate what your average price was on all the Bitcoin that you have, that DCG has, and what got you into it? What was the thing that said aha? What was that aha moment that got you in when you first started buying?
Yeah, so I started buying, the only way to do it, I started buying in 2012, and I was doing it on Mt. Gox, because there was really no other way to do it. And because I didn't know if Mt. Gox was going to exist, the next day, I did it in like $5,000 chunks. And at the time, I remember it would take like sometimes 2, 3, 4 weeks to even get money on the exchange. So I ended up buying, I believe it was about $200,000 worth of Bitcoin at sub $10. But you do the math and you're like, oh my God, that's like a huge sum of money. But the reality is when the price went to $80, $90, $100 is when I started doing angel investing in the space. And so I've said before, I invested in Coinbase with Bitcoin. And I don't know if I actually gave Coinbase Bitcoin, but I at least sold the Bitcoin to do the Coinbase investment. And for me, it was similar. My investment in probably Ripple and my investment in BitPay and these other early companies was kind of was using Bitcoin. So while DCG is, I'm sure, one of the largest owners. And by the way, everything that I do in crypto is at DCG. So, there's no longer a personal stuff. Everything is DCG. So, DCG is by far one of the largest owners of crypto assets in the world. But I've gotten super excited about other things other than Bitcoin. I will always have a special place in my heart for Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is the will become the reserve currency of the world. I believe it's going to displace gold. I believe it's going to change our financial system. But I also see the value in innovative new protocols that are attacking other problems.
Like which one?
Was that?
Which protocols are you hottest on right now?
Oh, you want me to talk my book? All right, I'll happily talk my book. So thematically, I think privacy is going to become an even more a popular investing theme. So the two privacy coins that we're super excited about are Zcash and then a Zcash fork, which is called Horizon. So those are the two that we're focused on there. I'm excited about what Filecoin can do. Certainly the price has gotten ahead of itself, but I'm excited about what it can do. We're excited about a protocol called LivePeer, which is kind of decentralizing kind of the transcode distribution of video around the world. I still love my Decentraland. I love the metaverse and this whole NFT craze, which will hopefully end soon. I think is a fantastic way to again demonstrate the potential for a decentralized metaverse like Decentraland.
Barry, just checking in with crypto Twitter. Two common questions I got was when Coinbase should relist XRP, and as we know, the GBTC Grayscale also dissolved its XRP trust. Well, should that be coming back? And the second one is, should more companies like Coinbase put Bitcoin on their balance sheet?
On the XRP question, in the U.S., you just need to be very careful with decisions you make around tokens that could be or are deemed to be securities. There's real consequences, and so I can't speak for if and when Coinbase should do it, of course. But for our businesses, until I think there is a kind of a regulatory green light in the U.S., it's a risk that companies just can't take. And then as for Coinbase, the way that they manage the balance sheet, we hold a lot of Bitcoin on our balance sheet, and we just think that that's kind of just a great way to hold assets, hold cash. For Coinbase, I think as a proxy for investors to get into the asset class, their revenue is so closely tied to the price of Bitcoin that it seems to me having the war chest of cash is probably provides better optionality for them. But hey, look, I'd be all for Coinbase accumulating a ton of Bitcoin. That'd be good for all of us.
Just to turn away from the U.S. for one moment, China is racing ahead to develop a digital currency. What is the significance of this? How big a deal is it, and will it pose a threat to the U.S. dollar?
I think it's scaring the, I don't know if I can curse, scaring the ass out of people in the U.S., government officials in the U.S. For a number of reasons. At the very least, I think it's serving as a catalyst for other governments around the world to increase their R&D and experimentation around, true kind of digital forms of money. But look, we all know that, China nor the U.S. nor any other country is going to cap the supply of their fiat currency. So I view it as super positive for Bitcoin and our space, because it's really just going to it will be a catalyst for the investments in infrastructure and frankly the education of people around the world around the benefits of not having to go through a bank middleman to move money around.
Barry, what a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, taking the time to get out of the bunker and share your insights on this historic day.
Awesome. You guys are doing great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that was Digital Currency Group CEO Barry Silbert. Coming up, more crypto markets and Coinbase analysis with Hero CEO and co-founder Muneeb Ali.
The Crypto Markets Update is presented by Grayscale, the world's largest digital currency asset manager.
Checking in on Bitcoin, the XBX Bitcoin price right now trading at 64,140-ish. It's up 2%, over 2% over the past 24 hours, as well as the ETX Ether price right now at 23.76. ETH is up 6.6%, according to TradeBlock data. And joining us to discuss the crypto markets is Muneeb Ali, the CEO of Hero and co-founder of Stacks, which is focused on building apps and smart contracts on Bitcoin. Welcome, Muneeb.
Glad to be here.
Great to have you here. All right, so you wear the Bitcoin laser eyes on Twitter, meaning you think that Bitcoin will hit $100,000 eventually. So what's your when do you think that'll happen, and what's your near and long-term outlook?
Yeah, I think when you think about Bitcoin, like if you've been there since the early days, like I was listening to Barry, he was also definitely there since the early days. At one point, like $1,000 Bitcoin was a crazy price, right? But once that's in the backview mirror, and once $10,000 is in the backview mirror, if you do the probability calculation of like what historically Bitcoin has done and what it's meant to be, like these 100,000 type numbers, they no longer sound crazy, right? So I think it's just a calculation based on what sounded crazy 5 years ago has already happened, and it's in the backview mirror already.
When do you think it'll happen?
I think that's anyone's guess. In general, like my personal mental model is I don't think we are anywhere near the top of this bull market. And so I think the next 6 months, plus minus 2 months, would be my best guess. But I'm not a trader. I'm a computer scientist.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning, Muneeb. So we talked about this a little bit with Barry, but I'd love to hear your perspective as somebody who's been in the space for a long time. So again, talking about sort of like the basic principles of crypto and the ethos of crypto, Bitcoin's supposed to be, kill the intermediary, be relatively private. Coinbase is pretty much none of those things. It is an intermediary. It's not private at all. You're basically giving them as much information as you give to open a bank account. If you want to move crypto, you have to send them a photo of your ID. So is this really in the spirit of crypto? I mean, is there, as someone who's been in this space for a long time, is there anything about this that feels out of sync with, why crypto was created?
Yeah, so I think I get that question a lot, and I'm actually a big supporter of Coinbase. I think the main reason for that is that crypto, for me, stands for freedom, right? And companies like Coinbase, they're actually giving people the freedom of choice. Coinbase is actually very different from a company like Facebook. If you think about Facebook, Facebook is sitting on all the user data, and there's no way for you to exit that. Coinbase is a company built on top of open protocols, and users have the freedom to exit. So when I'm keeping my Bitcoin in Coinbase, I'm keeping them because it's a competitive product, and they're winning me over their product. And I can choose to leave. I can withdraw my Bitcoin at any point that I want to, right? And they're actually serving a huge need in the market where I think if you imagine people who are just getting introduced to crypto or just getting introduced to Bitcoin, they're looking for some sort of a trusted brand that makes it easy for them to actually start their journey. And I think over time, as they discover kind of like the essence of crypto and owning your own kind of like money, people can definitely withdraw their Bitcoin. They can withdraw their assets to their own hardware wallets and so on. But the role that Coinbase is playing is actually critical for the growth of the overall ecosystem.
Muneeb, what is your relationship to Coinbase? You said you're a supporter. Were you an investor? Are you working with them in some way?
Coinbase was at Y Combinator in 2012. I went through Y Combinator in 2014. Our main investor is Union Square Ventures. They led the Series A round of Coinbase as well. So they're a fellow portfolio company. I followed the journey of Brian and Fred over the years. So just a cheerleader for the work that they're doing. And I think over the years, I've had great interactions with them and the Coinbase team as well.
So as an entrepreneur in the space, how does it feel looking at them from your perspective? Does this change anything for you, for your businesses now?
Definitely, right? I think Barry kind of like hit the nail on the head earlier that Coinbase direct listing is a historic moment because it basically gives a reference point for every other business in the industry, right? So this is the first company that's going public. I think one way to think about this would be 10 years ago, if you would look at the largest businesses, publicly traded businesses, they were mostly like financial institutions or oil companies and so on. And over the last decade, we've just seen tech companies completely take that over. And I think in my view, it's entirely possible 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's actually the crypto businesses or even crypto protocols that are amongst the largest publicly traded assets in the world. And I think Coinbase basically is the first entry on the public markets with that. And I think there's a lot more to come behind it.
And we just want to point out that the markets are open right now. It's 9:30. We see a picture there of the Nasdaq in Times Square in New York. We have Coinbase on the monitor up there, right, for everyone to see. But so just want to mark that occasion there. Lawrence, you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So to your point, we didn't have centralized exchanges at all, let's say 12 years ago. Are they going to be still there 12 years from now? Will decentralized exchanges take over? Are we watching the last gasps of centralized exchanges? Or is this going to be proof that they're going to dominate the market a decade from now?
I think the jury's out there between centralized and decentralized exchanges. Again, I'm a free market believer. I think if there is more optionality for people, if there are more choices, like that's actually a good thing in general. So, and also I think Coinbase as a business, the way to look at them is not like just an exchange. I think they've actually done tremendous work in trying to diversify their revenue streams. They're in the custodial business. They're actually doing some very innovative things in new areas as well. So we should look at them as a crypto native business that is now a public company. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to adapt to upcoming challenges like fairly quickly.
So Coinbase is obviously going public at a really frothy time in the crypto market. And, a lot of their earnings data is tied to the success of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies themselves. How much do you think Coinbase's success or its valuation sort of over the long term depends on just the success of the crypto market as a whole? Because a lot of what's drawing up the prices now is not only Coinbase's business, it's also just kind of what's happening in the crypto market.
Yeah, so I do think that if you're a crypto business, if you're a crypto protocol, like you are kind of like tied with the general cycles of these markets. But I also think that people have kind of learned that lesson over the last years, right? Like, for example, now people almost like plan for explicit bear market cycles because they know that this is different from traditional tech. These things tend to happen in cycles. So I wouldn't be surprised if, a lot of planning has gone into how to minimize the impact of this cyclic nature of crypto markets on the public performance of Coinbase. And I think from what I could tell, like I did a cursory read of the S1, I think there has been a lot of thought that has been put into basically diversifying their business and making sure that they can also decouple as much as possible from the cyclic nature of the crypto markets.
So with everything that's happening, is this where you expected crypto to be right now when you first got involved a few years ago?
Yeah, so I think in 2013, when I discovered Bitcoin, definitely this felt like this would be almost like unimaginable. And early on, it was a bunch of really like people who are deep in the technology and just love what the protocols could do and what it stood for. But I think right now, I actually feel that this is just the beginning, right? Like the 7 years ago, Muneeb would would have thought that this is kind of like the end of the journey, but right now my feelings are this is just the beginning. We're scratching the surface of what's possible there.
Right. You also just recently announced the launch of a $4 million accelerator for Stacks. Stacks is building on Bitcoin, hoping to have smart contracts and a developer community much like Ethereum. Where do you see that head? Do you think that, what are the challenges involved in that? Because Ethereum itself is having a lot of challenges, and building on Bitcoin has proven much more difficult for developers.
Yeah, so that's building on Bitcoin has been the work that we've been doing. The Stacks blockchain launched roughly, I would say, 2 months ago, and I think we've got more than $800 million of total value locked in a smart contract, which basically demonstrates that smart contracts for Bitcoin are not only possible, but they're actually showing traction with $800 million locked, earning 10% in Bitcoin on it. And the Stacks accelerator is really an effort to get the next generation of entrepreneurs who are excited about Bitcoin, who want to do interesting things with $1 trillion worth of capital that mostly sits passively, and they want to actively deploy that into smart contracts. And the accelerator is actually run by Trevor, who I support from Stacks Foundation. I had very, very little to do with it, but I'm a supporter, and I think I'm excited about what kind of things people will build on top of Bitcoin and Stacks.
Indeed. Very early days, as you said, Muneeb. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good luck with Stacks and building on the Bitcoin blockchain.
Thanks for having me.
All right. That was Stacks CEO and co-founder Muneeb Ali. Time now for the daily forecast, an update on what's happening in the Asia crypto markets. Here's Angie Lau of Forecast News.
Welcome to the Daily Forecast, April 14th, 2021. It is all about Coinbase today, and here's how Asia crypto enthusiasm is shaping up. BINANCE announced it will start listing Coinbase's stock token on its website. BINANCE, of course, stepping into this new space of tokenized stock trading behind the likes of FTX and Bittrex. Hi, I'm Angie Lau, editor-in-chief of Forecast News. Let's get you up to speed from Asia to the world. Bitcoin in its highest bull run to date throughout the Asia trading day. Sentiment, no doubt, spurred on by this Coinbase Nasdaq listing. At the close of 4 p.m. local Hong Kong time, Bitcoin was priced 64,000, up over 5.5% from the day before. A lot more corporate treasuries getting into the space. But what we're also seeing as Bitcoin rises to yet another record is that retail investors in Asia are looking elsewhere. It's a phenomenon that's lifting altcoins. We hit the streets virtually to South Korea, where the kimchi premium has made Bitcoin even more expensive than anywhere else in the world.
크립토 시장의 파이가 더 커질 거라 예상을 하기 때문에 이제 올라가지 못한 알트코인들이 더 상승폭이 클 거라고 생각해서 이제 알트코인에 투자를 하게 됐습니다. 루나코인과 그리고 이오스, 비트코인 캐시, 그리고 리플, 스텔라루멘 이렇게 가지고 있습니다.
저 이더리움 몰빵했습니다. 저희는 요즘 가상자산으로 밀크라든지 페이코인 통해서 도미노 피자랑 그런 음식들 사 먹고요.
Take a look at the top 10 in the crypto world. Dogecoin, no joke here, entered the leaderboard. It surged more than 70% over the past 24 hours in Asia. XRP in double-digit growth at the close of Asia's market day. And by the way, there's even a premium on XRP in South Korea. It's trading above the $2.10 mark in that country. Now, this trend of people changing their investment bets to smaller altcoins is also something we're seeing in Hong Kong.
咁佢有好多其他嘅 chain 去同佢去搶嗰個 market share。咁譬如係話有啲朋友仔佢會將個ETH 賣咗去轉咗去幣安 BNB， 咁會有呢啲咯。
Coinbase's listing on the New York Nasdaq is a sign that institutional investors believe that adoption and trade of cryptocurrencies has room to grow. 90% of Coinbase's revenues are actually derived from retail activity in Bitcoin and Ether, and it depends on crypto's boom and bust cycle. So the stock could see, potentially, dramatic swings after its listing. Here in Asia, the question is, will we see the same sort of open arms to exchanges similar to Coinbase? We spoke with Andrew Sullivan. He's a Hong Kong-based founder of Asian Market Sense, who thinks that South Korea is the next target for public listing.
Well, I think probably the first place will be South Korea, because that's obviously had the best track record, the most exposure. You've got so many interested parties there that this is bound to raise their hopes of being able to follow suit in the not too distant future.
Meanwhile, a quieter day of trading here in Asia. Most indices ended positively. Hong Kong stocks were up, comes as e-commerce giants in the city such as JD.com, Meituan and ByteDance issued statements saying they will comply with strict antitrust requirements from Beijing. Nikkei 225 bucked the upward trend. It dropped about 0.5% on lower machinery orders. And that's the Daily Forecast. I'm Angie Lau. Until the next time.
Thank you, Angie, for that update in Asia. Coming up, Coinbase's public listing on the Nasdaq, and checking in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day.
The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
Welcome back. Our next guest is co-founder of BitAngels, an angel network for crypto startups, and the CEO of Transform Group, a blockchain advisory and PR firm. Please join us in welcoming Michael Terpin. Hi, Michael.
Good morning.
Good morning. All right, so you are an angel investor to various crypto investments in the space. Do you wish you got into Coinbase?
Well, it was interesting. BitAngels actually started at the very first Bitcoin Foundation conference when I met David Johnston and we started BitAngels. That was the conference in early 2013 that Coinbase announced its A round that Barry had just mentioned he was part of. So it was a little bit too late to get into Coinbase at that point. It was already in the professional ranks. But quite frankly, it was the inspiration for BitAngels in many ways, because I looked at that investment and walked around and said, why are there large VCs such as Andreessen Horowitz and Union Square Ventures putting money into Bitcoin startups, and there's really no angel group? And that's how BitAngels was formed.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, when you put money in these in the companies you invest in, how realistic do you hope for a home run like Coinbase, or are you just hoping to at least hit doubles?
Well, over the years, our members, because it's a decentralized group, everybody does their own investments, but have done quite well with certain things. It's a portfolio approach, just like other styles of investing. I was an investor in more traditional technology companies, and prior to that, .coms. And you hope that maybe 1 out of 20 gets you your really big return that makes up for all the other ones.
Does this offering, does it change the multiples you're going to be using to value companies going forward, or do you think they'll still stay relatively where they were a few months ago?
Well, that's an interesting question. I agree with what Barry said at the top of the show here about we now have discovery for what the multiples can be for, say, exchanges, for example. We already have examples of what tokens are based on other tokens, and now we have what public companies are going to be at scale. I'm an investor in several companies that are looking to go public this year, as well as one that is already public in Europe, but obviously a lot of private ones, as well as an investor in tokens as well.
Good morning. So we've just had so much celebration and hype. I'm looking for a little bit more of a sober analysis. Could you talk a little bit about what are some of the potential risks to Coinbase's success over the short and long term?
I'd say, the growth of decentralized exchanges like Uniswap, if they really explode, is certainly a risk. the continuing dominance globally of BINANCE, which just seems to get bigger and bigger. But they've certainly established themselves as a top tier U.S. exchange. I think the biggest risk is just how the U.S. treats cryptocurrency ownership versus the rest of the world. It's still something where if you go and say, hey, I've got an account in Coinbase, and you tell your bank that, they may say, we don't want to bank you. And that's not true in Europe and a lot of other sort of first world nations.
Do you think that's likely to happen, that kind of policy in the United States?
That there'll be a change for the better? I certainly hope so.
No, that the U.S. could actually take a more of a aggressive stance towards cryptocurrency in a bad way.
Well, they already have in a sense. So we're looking for some clarity under Gensler, because really under Clayton we didn't get clarity at all. We just had enforcement actions, and I think some of those are now being challenged in the Ripple suit. So the nice thing about Gensler is he seems to know a lot more about crypto, having taught it at blockchain courses at MIT, and also seems to be much more willing to engage with participants and propose regulations instead of just enforcement actions, given his history at the CTFC.
Michael, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Appreciate your insights.
Thank you.
That was co-founder of BitAngels, an angel network for crypto startups, and CEO of Transform Group, and a blockchain advisory and PR firm. Coming up, checking in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Manager Nick Day. Welcome back. Time to check in with CoinDesk Global Policy and Regulation Managing Editor Nick Day, who is also the editor of CoinDesk's The State of Crypto newsletter. Welcome, Nick.
Hey, good morning.
All right, so this morning, obviously, we have the Coinbase direct listing, but we're also hearing from the SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce, who's updating the safe harbor proposal for token sales. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so SEC Commissioner Hester Peirce has long been, active in the crypto community. She first proposed a 3-year grace period for crypto startups to, sell tokens and raise funds and build out their projects in 2019. And she published an updated version of this proposal yesterday. It removes some of the provisions that were in the original, including a good faith clause, a requirement that people who build, must never have been accused of violating registration requirements on securities laws. But what it does add is she put in some new clauses. The biggest ones, I think, are she now has some guidance on, how a startup can say, oh yeah, our network is decentralized. That basically she would require outside counsel to publish a report saying, here are the details we match, here's the requirements that are hit, here's how we know it's decentralized, here's how we know it's functional. So that's probably the biggest change. Of course, this is a proposal, so now it remains to be seen whether or not the other commissioners adopt this, or how this is seen moving forward. Commissioner Peirce did publish this on GitHub, so anyone can provide feedback.
And there's some other SEC-related news, right, Nick, that may come out today?
Well, so there's actually two things now. The most important thing of today, obviously, is going to be Gary Gensler will be confirmed. Stop talking about Coinbase. Let's talk about Gary Gensler. No, but that is going to be today. He will be confirmed. The confirmation vote is expected to start around 10:30, unless there is other Senate business first, but we will be watching that. And then literally about 10 minutes ago, the SEC published the Wisdom Tree Bitcoin ETF in the Federal Register under the public inspection, meaning it goes live tomorrow. So that clock is kicking off tomorrow, and we now officially have 2 ETFs that are on the clock.
How long does the clock last usually? How long does that happen?
So it can go out to about 240 days, but the initial deadlines are 3 weeks to provide comments and 45 days for the SEC to make a initial determination.
Nick, thanks so much for the update.
Thank you.
That was CoinDesk Managing Editor of Global Policy and Regulation, Nick Day. Don't forget to sign up for the State of Crypto newsletter on CoinDesk.com. And our next guest has co-authored required reading material in the crypto space, covering its early beginnings in the books The Age of Cryptocurrencies and The Truth Machine. Joining us now is CoinDesk Chief Content Officer, Michael Casey. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, guys. Great show so far.
Hello.
You are no stranger to the crypto space and CoinDesk. You've covered every milestone in Bitcoin and the rise of digital assets. So how does Coinbase's public listing weave into the history?
Well, first of all, I haven't covered everything. I didn't get until 2013, so I can't claim to quite be right back there in the early days. Had no connection to Satoshi in those days, but certainly since 2013. Look, I think in that context, this is really important for the degree to which it pushes the bigger, wider story around crypto into the public sphere. Some of the prior guests have talked about this, but it's really important the degree to which this almost forces the hand of institutions and people who pay a lot of attention to the public markets to suddenly try to understand what all this stuff is about. So there's a learning curve that people are going to be forced to go under, and I think that's really constructive because, as people are saying about Gary Gensler, for example, to pick up on Nick's point about, let's talk about that. The good thing about Gensler is he understands this, and that means that the dialogue around it becomes richer and more constructive. So I think to the degree to which Coinbase is forcing that more widely is actually a really interesting part of this.
So, Michael, it came across the wires during the show that Bernie Madoff has passed away at the age of 82. It happens right when Coinbase goes public. Obviously they're coincidental. Don't read too much into things. But nonetheless, how much of a change are we really seeing between old finance and new finance with Coinbase going on to a stock exchange and not, staying private or in the crypto world and pure forever?
Yeah, look, trying the links between these stories is the challenge you're putting me up to here, Lawrence. I appreciate that, but I mean, it is somewhat more than symbolic. I mean, Madoff is a symbol of the old bad ways of Wall Street, and without a doubt, a lot of people got into this space, were inspired by it as an alternative to the malfeasance and sort of struggles that really were brought to the light of throughout the crisis of 2008. So there is a real tie here. Now, look, I'm in two minds about this. I mean, it really is so much more of a play to the old world, to list in and of itself, right? I mean, I think, and you asked a question of this to Barry earlier, and I think it's a really good one. You're now subjected to the quarterly demands of the market. They want to see performance on that basis. And they also want to see performance on the basis of what they regard as, the rules around that. So it forces a certain compliance with the old ways of doing things. And I think it has the risk of shifting incentives negatively. This is starting with the downside of this, because I do think, as I said before, there's real positives in terms of the conversation that gets generated here. But look, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal 2 days ago pointing out that CEO pay just soared in 2020. And to me, that is a sign that the stock market, as supposedly a driver of public interest in terms of the shareholder alignment and everything else, is actually broken. Because this was a recession. A lot of millions of people lost their jobs. They weren't rewarded, those shareholders, for running their companies well. They were rewarded because a massive influx of liquidity pushed shares up. And now Coinbase, which in some respects is coming out of the crypto world that was saying no to all of that, is kind of buying into it, right? This is not a critique of Coinbase per se, but it brings everybody back into that system. So there is real problems with the stock market, and I don't know whether this is, but it is interesting as well to think whether the alternatives to Coinbase, decentralized exchanges and the like, could in fact, challenge all of this.
So could we see a moral hazard, if you will, with Coinbase, and that be an Achilles heel when compared to decentralized exchanges?
Yeah, you could, I think. It's a strong word because I think it implies malfeasance. I'm not necessarily saying that, Coinbase is going to do anything untoward, but the incentives change. There's no doubt about that, right? There's been loads and loads of academic research on what, ownership of options does to the decision-making of leaders of listed companies. And that's, of course, offset against the fact that they are now subject to a lot more regulatory oversight, which is presumably a good thing. Although I would also argue that ultimately then, if you think that one of the problems, and I personally do, with cryptocurrency is trying to jam, the structure of, say, the FinCEN, KYC rules into a crypto world that is trying to create financial inclusion and remove the gatekeeper powers of banks, then having a big centralized custodian like Coinbase now even more under regulatory scrutiny could arguably force us into somewhat of a more negative approach from regulators to this space. So there's real pros and cons in this whole process.
So just more generally, Coinbase really does represent a key tension in the cryptocurrency world, right? Because we've discussed this with our previous guests. Cryptocurrency started out as this really rebellious, anti-institutional, relatively private form of money, right? But obviously the problem with that is that's not really mainstream friendly because people associate it with crime or hacks or shadowy banking. So of course you have to make some compromises. And Coinbase represents some of those compromises, right? It's not particularly private. You have to give them a lot of data. They're holding that data. The IRS can come and ask for data, but and they're holding Bitcoin, so you're not holding your own Bitcoin, and it's definitely a compromise. And I guess the question is, where do you draw the line? Like, where does crypto just stop being crypto and it just basically becomes opening a bank account?
Well, the cool thing about the crypto space is that it is open and permissionless in all these other ways, and so where you get pressure on one side, it kind of opens up opportunities elsewhere. So yes, you're absolutely right to draw that distinction. And I think that, as I said before, it raises real questions about, is this truly in line with the spirit of the place? But think about what's happening in the DeFi world, right? DEXs are, that's an alternative to this. And if people feel as if, something like a centralized model, Coinbase is now capturing all of this is going down the wrong direction. There are these outlets. There are these really creative outlets, and some of the innovation is a direct response to the restrictions elsewhere. So it is a very dynamic environment. So just because all of a sudden there's a bunch of institutions now making money in some place, I don't think that means we're killing off innovation in all these other alternative environments. In fact, it could arguably push it even more.
Michael, it goes to a concern that I've voiced previously, with the internet, it was the freedom of information. People have access to more information that they never had before, and that was great. In blockchain, it's you can now bank the unbanked, but we saw what happened with the internet with a couple of companies controlling the data of everyone, manipulating elections, manipulating information that we receive. Could that somehow weave its way into blockchain and in companies like Coinbase, where we could somehow, our financial and information is suddenly now controlled by a new generation of class of people?
Yeah. So I actually think not, at least not in the case of Coinbase, right? Because Coinbase's advantages do not come necessarily from network effects. I mean, they certainly have to have a liquid exchange, and so therefore that liquid exchange requires a large network. But there are so many other alternative ways to trade crypto. It's not as if I need to be on Coinbase because everybody else is on Coinbase, which is what the Facebook kind of Google thing is, right? It's very hard to break the monopolies of these big internet platforms, because to do so is to go to a much more inferior product. But certainly the exchange world of crypto is far more diverse and competitive. So, and you don't have to be Coinbase just because it's listed, right? So I actually think that it's certainly something to be aware of, and there are true warning signs in that Internet 2.0 era. But the decentralization drive of the crypto space is pushing against that very strongly, and I don't necessarily think this is relevant here. It is relevant, I suppose, to some extent with crypto coins. Like Bitcoin has its network effect, but that's a different story altogether.
We could go on all day on this, but we have to wrap up the show, unfortunately. Michael, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys. Great show.
All right, that was CoinDesk Chief Content Officer Michael Casey. Thank you, Emily Parker, as well as Lawrence Lewitinn for joining me this morning. Up next is Coin Toss at 10:30. This is First Mover.